Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was in North Carolina earlier this week, campaigning for Senate candidate Thom Tillis, who's running against incumbent Kay Hagan and 3rd District incumbent Congressman Walter Jones. Our C-SPAN cameras followed Senator Paul to stops in Raleigh and Greenville. This is an hour.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming out. Oh, I like your shirt.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks for coming out.
Both here. And I'll
See ya.
take pictures. Okay.
Made my day.
Oh, you live in Raleigh, or where do you live?
Yes, I live in Raleigh. And I'm a big
Thank
supporter.
you so much.
Wow, that's a good looking couple.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
Oh.
You live here?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We
Man, my pleasure, brother. Good going. Keep it up.
Thanks for coming out.
My pleasure.
You live here in Raleigh?
Yes, I do. I'm precinct chairman of 0808
Okay.
district here. It's about 3,000 voters.
You in the Navy?
Yes, I was. USS Topeka. That was in the Second World War.
Okay. I have a nephew who flies the P-3 for the Navy. Although we've been joking with him, he's had a terrible assignment. He's been in Monterey, California for the last 2 years.
Well, that's tough.
At the leadership school.
Oh, sure. Oh, I see.
Yeah, and I think he's going back to, he's actually going to Hawaii for his next assignment.
Oh, that's
so,
good.
you know, tough life.
Been
but,
there any number of times.
Yeah.
On my ship.
Yeah, he's done his active duty flying, and now he's trained other pilots, and I'm not sure. He's been in about 13 years. I think he's going to stay in for a career, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, hey, you keep up the good work.
Will do. Thanks for supporting Thom Tillis. Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, how
nice
are
to
you?
meet you. You were like my favorite
Oh,
U.S.
well,
Senator.
thank you.
I was
Thank you.
thrilled.
Want to
would
do a
it be
picture?
okay if I get
Sure.
a picture? Thank you.
perfect.
Thank you for all you do. You are a rock star.
You from here in Raleigh?
I'm from Apex. Yep.
Been to Apex,
So,
you know, I spent 7 years in Durham.
no way.
Yep.
So did you used to live here?
Well, I went to Duke for 7 years.
You did? I didn't know that.
Two different times. I was there for 4 years in the 80s and then 3 years in the early 90s.
Oh my gosh, I never knew that.
Yep.
So you were like right down the street.
Yep. In fact, we used to go somewhere near Apex to swim in a quarry.
Really?
It was near Pittsburgh.
Oh, I've never been there.
It was always a blast. It was sort of everybody would either ride bikes at a little beach that they'd imported.
Oh,
And
really?
we'd dive off the cliffs into the water.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. I can't believe that you used to live here.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming to North Carolina.
Yep. We're
It's
hoping
so exciting.
Tom pulls it out.
I just found out late last night.
If we win North Carolina, I think we'll win the Senate back.
We have to. We absolutely have to. Otherwise, it's the end of our country.
We
I
gotta
mean, it
do
is. And thank you for standing brave. And,
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Paul, thanks for coming out.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Speaker Tillis has been a strong proponent of public-private partnerships, and in particular foreign-owned toll roads. You might have heard the first foreign-owned toll road, a contract was signed, it's going in Mecklenburg County. 50 years for Sintra. Sintra's bankrupt. So a couple of questions. Do you support public-private partnerships, and do you support foreign-owned toll roads?
I don't think we've actually had a specific opinion on toll roads, but we have had an opinion on our infrastructure, that we need to do something about our infrastructure. And one idea that I have had and that I've promoted quite a bit is lowering the tax on American profit overseas to try to encourage it to come home. We call it repatriation, and then taking that tax money and putting it into a road fund. I think that you could come up with somewhere between $50 and $70 billion in tax revenue, actually lowering a tax and getting more revenues. That's one thing we have to do.
Do you have a position on public-private partnerships?
Picture right here.
All right.
Do you mind taking a picture? Thank you so much, sir. Can we take one more picture? Thank you so much for being here for Speaker Tillis
You
Week.
all live here?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes, do you have my camera? I'm
Who
sorry.
are we doing?
Right here. All right. Thank you so much, sir.
You all working for Tom?
No, sir. Yes, sir. Just here for support. So, thank you so much for coming.
Great.
We really appreciate you being in Raleigh.
And so what do you do? taxpayer group called North Carolina Taxpayers Union, and we used to give out awards to the legislators. So I was remembering the the Capitol as we drove by, because we used to do press conferences and give out awards to those who voted for less taxes. In fact, I think I was here when the Republicans took over for the first time in the State House.
Well, great time to be in Raleigh.
Yep, glad to be back.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Yes, work you're doing for this country. So thank you.
Do you mind if I get a picture with you? Hey, how are you doing, Senator? So I'm running for North Carolina Senate here in District 16. I am, right here. This is where I'm at. Yeah. Can I get one with a handshake? Sure. Awesome.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Can you tell?
You can do it.
You got it?
Awesome.
Thank you so much for coming in. God bless you.
Thank you.
Hey,
how are you?
doing? Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out. We appreciate it. North Carolina needs you.
You're very welcome. Bring back up a little.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, better. So, you live here in Raleigh, or?
I do. I live here in Raleigh. My husband is born and raised here. I'm just going to switch places with him if that's okay.
Hey, Senator,
And,
appreciate your
Yeah.
truthfulness speaking out on how you believe. That's great. That's great. That's great. Handshake, yeah.
All right.
All right.
So,
Great.
what do you
Thanks,
do? What
Senator.
do you do here?
I actually work for state government down here. It's 29 years, but I want to get into politics like you. That's what I want to do.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we need good people.
conservatives in.
Well, we need people that have a variety of backgrounds.
yeah,
We've got enough lawyers, and
Yeah, exactly.
I'm married to one.
Yeah, she's married to one. She's, it's practical sense. Is what you. I mean, it's the economy's stupid, right?
well, the thing is that most people get it. You don't spend more than your check, right?
Right.
Everybody gets it in their family budget. You think it would make sense for Washington not to spend more money?
You would think.
So we bring in about $3.1 trillion. That's an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
You think we can just get away with just spending what comes in?
We have plenty of money. They just need to spend it wisely.
Our problem is we spend 3.8 trillion, 3.1,
Yeah.
3.0. So kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Instead of being defensive, and I think that's something that we've done too long as conservatives to be on our heels. And I teach my kids, you've got to be who you are and direct the conversation.
Yeah, not be afraid of it. I mean, conservatism is good.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. Kentucky, I just went through your state not too long ago. Yeah. L8. Do you ever drink L8?
Excuse me? Oh, yeah, L8. Yep.
You're good.
You're going to address the press, but no questions.
Stole all the money out of the highway trust fund.
Right down?
Yep, right next to Tillis, right up here. You do have questions? Okay, we can call them 2 or 3.
What's your wife in here? She's at
1, 2, 3.
Okay, I can have you two stand right here.
Oh, yeah, I thought, I didn't know if you'd already had. I think we should. Yeah, good, yeah. No, I think so. Yeah.
Can we bring you gentlemen forward and we'll shoot back? The microphones are all here.
What's that?
Can we bring you guys up and we'll all shoot back?
We might need her instruments local again.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Ed's and good morning. I'm Tom Tillis. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. And in a moment, I also want to make sure everybody knows my wife Susan is here. I love her. She's my wife of 27 years and a great asset to this campaign. And I appreciate all the patience that she has when you're running. It's a tough job, and it's great to have a loving wife by your side to do this. I want to thank all the volunteers over here who are working hard, knocking on doors, making phone calls, sending out literature. You're the difference maker in this campaign, and you're why we're here today. So thank you all very much. to turn it over to Senator Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm running for the Senate is that Kay Hagan said that she was going to go to Washington and finally get something done. Kay Hagan said that anybody that votes with the president 92% of the time doesn't work in North Carolina. She said that about Elizabeth Dole and President Bush. She's gone to Washington and voted with President Obama 96% of the time. She promised us if we liked our health care, we could keep it. We can. 54,000 retirees are receiving letters this week and next week letting them know that the federal government's decided their health care is not good enough. A month from now, they're going to get premium notices. They're going to be increased premiums and decreased coverage. These are a continuous stream of broken promises. Kay Hagan said that the $10 trillion debt back in 2008 was a disgrace. She agreed with the president. Now the debt is $17 trillion, approaching $18 trillion. The Middle East situation is unacceptable. We have to destroy ISIS and figure out how to do that. We need a president that needs to have a plan, not call the greatest threat to terror the JV team just a few months ago. And we've got a senator who sits on important committees that should be developing strategies, and she has no plan. Kay Hagan has failed the people of North Carolina. That's why we've got to send her home and fire Harry Reid as the majority leader. Now I want to turn it over. I'm thrilled to have Senator Paul in town. It's an honor to get the support that I have from the broad spectrum of caucus members in the Republican Senate caucus. Senator Paul is fighting tirelessly for our freedom. He's an independent thinker, and I love independent thinkers. Leaders are independent thinkers. People that will go to Washington and expect nothing more than accountability and ultimately the freedom that we need to invest back in the American people and take out of the federal government. This man is one of the lions in the Senate responsible for that. I'm proud to have him in North Carolina. I'm proud to have his support. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Senator Rand Paul.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out. I'm happy to be in North Carolina today and to endorse my friend Thom Tillis for the U.S. Senate. As some of you know, I spent 7 years here. I did my medical training over in Durham at Duke University. And as a physician, it bothers me that we have senators like Kay Hagan who frankly think that you're not smart enough to choose your own doctor. The arrogance of passing legislation that says she knows better who you can choose. I have at least probably close to a dozen friends in my small town in Bowling Green, Kentucky, who have had cancer. They got to go to MD Anderson. They got to go to one of the best cancer centers in the country. With Obamacare, you get free diet counseling, but you don't get to choose your doctor. And so really, these are fundamental American choices. It goes against the fabric of the country to have legislation that prevents you from having the choice of your own doctor. I have a 22-year-old son. He has birth control, he's got pregnancy coverage, he's got pediatric dental coverage for the kids he doesn't have. It's a crime that the country's giving him in vitro fertilization. My unmarried 22-year-old son does not need in vitro fertilization, okay? He needs a bare bones catastrophic insurance plan. He needs choice. He needs to be able to choose something that's cheap, that would cover him in the time of an accident. This debate over health care is not a wonky debate. It's not about health care policy. It's about freedom versus coercion. 3 months after Obamacare was passed, Kay Hagan had another chance to try to make it less bad. We had a specific vote on whether or not we would grandfather in people who had their insurance already, people who had already chosen their doctors. Kay Hagan looked the other way and voted twice, first for Obamacare and then against allowing people the choice to choose their own doctor. I think that nothing good will happen in this country until Harry Reid's gone. People say, is there a difference between Republicans and Democrats? Yes. Republicans believe in balancing the budget. We had a vote on a balanced budget amendment. Where was Kay Hagan? Voting against balancing the budget. We had a vote on, we've had many votes or many proposals come from the House on less regulations, lower taxes. None of those will ever get a vote as long as Harry Reid's in charge. So ground zero for taking the U.S. Senate back is North Carolina. You've got a Republican governor. You've got a Republican House and Senate. You need a Republican U.S. Senator. And I'm happy to be here today to support Tom Tillis for U.S. Senate.
We're going to take two questions.
Senator Paul, there's a thought that Sean Hall might be a spoiler in this race, the Libertarian candidate. Is your appearance here an indication that anybody who might be leaning towards Sean should vote for Speaker Tillis?
I'll say a little bit, but I think really Tom needs to answer this. There are many libertarian ideas that are Republican ideas. Lower taxes, the Constitution, limited government, balanced budgets, personal liberties. But I think Tom represents those ideas, and I'd like to let Tom respond to that.
The reason that we want any Senate member in the Republican caucus here is to demonstrate the broad base of support that we have for this campaign and the belief that Kay Hagan has failed the people of North Carolina. They all share that belief because they've seen her take votes that are inconsistent with where the nation wants to go and certainly where the state wants to go. I welcome any member of the Senate caucus to come here. I'm thrilled to have the broad support that I do because that's the way we got things done in Raleigh over the last 3.5 years. We had a broad base of people in the caucus. We had Democrats joining us with veto overrides against the Democrat governor. That's actually governing, unlike what Harry Reid does, which takes 350 bills coming out of the House and does nothing with them in the Senate. Harry Reid and through Kay Hagan's support has shut down the Congress, and we're not getting things done. There are a number of things that we should be able to do working with the people across the aisle, and they've failed to do that. Kay Hagan has rubber stamped Harry Reid's policies of obstruction and Obama's failed policies for the nation.
Last question.
Mr. Speaker, you've criticized Senator Hagan for the way she ran against Senator Dole and then her voting record since. If you prioritize reaching across the aisle, and that suggests you would want your voting percentage to be lower, give us some examples of things you could work with President Obama on. What of his policies would you vote with him on?
There are a variety of policies that have been passed out of the House that I know that even Democrats in the Senate would vote for if they could come to a vote. There are things about clawing back regulations, slowing down the failed policy of Obamacare, a number of different things that would help get the job and the economy back on track that Harry Reid's just decided he's going to wait until after the election.
What about things that have come from the White House, though?
You go after, I think what you have to do is find a Congress that functions. Economic policies, regulatory policies, tax policies, a variety of things that senators, a majority of the members of the Senate are prepared to vote on, but Barack Obama has told Harry Reid not to take it up. And they're delaying a lot of the really bad policies until after the election. He's delaying the discussion or the decision on amnesty till after the election. There's 473,000 cancellation letters that went out last year. Now they decided to delay it. Those same 473,000 cancellation notices for insurance coverage are going to come out next year. And this year, 54,000 are coming out for retirees coverage. So what we need to do is get a Congress functioning and send pro-growth, economic recovery, reduce regulations, types of bills to the president, and hopefully he'll care enough about the nation to let them sign into law or go into law. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
I'm very happy to run the next event. Sorry.
Good. I appreciate all y'all are doing. Can I get a picture of the shirt? I got you. Yeah. Senator Paul, can I take a picture with you? Sure. 1, 2, 3.
Turn this way. Turn this way. He'll take multiple. Oh, you got it.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right.
I follow you on Snapchat. You never snap me back.
Senator Paul, big thing. Can I get a thanks real quick? Yep. I'll get it. Paul.
Why don't you turn this way, this time drive on together.
Alright. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Senator.
We gotta go.
Get a picture? On Obamacare.
We gotta go, sorry.
On Obamacare,
Thanks.
Speaker Tillis said it's not going to get repealed.
We're right here.
see you, sir.
Really happy to see you. And we met a couple times. I know we met, but I'll go anywhere for like campaign for you if you ever need or there's something. And I give you my card, you can give it to your staff, you know, and any help you need for Iraq, like any advice, because I was there for the first few years. I mean, as a Kurd, I support it, but if I have to do it now, I will not do it again. Yeah.
Thank you all for exploring.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. My pleasure, sir. And I hope you run for the presidency, and I'll be there for you.
Thank you.
I'm from Dare County, the Outer Banks.
Wonderful.
We
represent Dare County. I've been out to the Outer Banks several times.
I like all the stuff you're doing for life.
Thank you.
I volunteer at a crisis pregnancy.
Spare house. Welcome to stay.
I'm trying to think of the little town we stayed in. It wasn't Okeechobee. It was somewhere between Nags Head and Okeechobee. I don't remember the name. Avon.
You should have let us know you were there.
That was like 15 years ago. 20 years ago. No, 25 years ago.
Come back.
Long time ago. Beautiful. Beautiful. Lighthouse still up?
Yes.
Yes,
they moved it. Yes.
Yeah, they
and
moved
it was successful.
But like 100 yards or something, not very far.
I believe they didn't disturb one rock. It was just unbelievable.
They just moved it on a thing.
We hope you in 16.
Thank you.
You're going to take over the White House.
Was that John? Yeah. He's getting introduced. Yep. Yep. I don't know where he's going.
Hey, how are you?
It's an honor to meet you, sir.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming to our state. Can I have your autograph?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sure he's here.
We'll just sign one, though.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If you want to mingle, then we'll speak in 2 minutes.
Jimmy Rice.
Thanks for coming.
Good luck.
Y'all live in Greenville or so where do you guys live? Pardon? Where do you live?
I live in Bath, which is east of here. Ricky lives in Greenville. Everybody knows where Greenville is.
Yep. Thanks for coming. Thanks for helping.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, I'm Reggie Fountain. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fred Linda. Nice to meet you.
Y'all live here in Greenville? Or
Yes, sir. We live here in Greenville, Washington. We always supported Walter. Before Walter, there was my uncle, Congressman L.H. Fountain. He was our congressman for 30 years till he retired. Then the Joneses took over.
So Walter's dad didn't represent this area?
Walter's dad did, and my uncle did before Walter's dad. So he was here for 30 years. Walter's dad there was here for a while, and then Walter's been here ever since.
So there was a little time in between Walter and his dad?
No, I think we went right from one to the other.
His father before I really got to know him that well. The man that I'm going to introduce that's going to speak for a few minutes, and then he said he would be willing to take a few questions, is a man that, in my opinion, can maybe be the only individual that can save America from self-destruction. This country is $17.7 trillion in debt. In the year 2000, it was $5.6 trillion. Today, it's $17.7 trillion. Neither Bush nor Obama have followed the Constitution. The man that I'm going to introduce right now believes in the Constitution, and when he raises his right hand to accept the presidency of the United States, he will follow the Constitution. I give to you right now Senator Rand Paul from the great state of Kentucky.
I think Walter just skipped a few steps, didn't he? But I am happy to be here today. It's a privilege for me to be here today to endorse my friend Walter Jones for re-election. Thank you all for coming. Walter's been a good friend of our family for a long time, and I think one thing you should know in North Carolina, in his district, is that he is well respected. He's respected as someone who is an independent voice in Washington and a voice of someone who really truly has a conscience, someone who truly thinks about the soldiers that live here in North Carolina and the soldiers that fight for us, the young men and women who volunteer to fight for our country. And to Walter and to myself, neither one of us see this as a chess game. This isn't checkers, this isn't chess, this isn't inanimate objects that you move around on a map. These are our precious commodity, our young men and women. And I think you'll find no greater supporter of the military and our strong national defense than Walter Jones. Y'all may have heard about a little girl. She thought she'd do something good. She wrote a letter to God. She said, "Dear God, if you'll send me $100, I'll do something good with it." The postmaster didn't know what to do with it, and so he said, "Well, I don't know, I'll send it to the president. He'll know what to do with it." And the president got it, and he said, well, he said to his secretary, she'll think, send her $5, send her $5. She'll think that's a lot of money. So she gets $5, and she's kind of a little bit underwhelmed, but her parents, they always send a thank you. So she writes a thank you. She says, "Dear God, thanks for the money. The next time, don't send it through Washington. They stole it." I think we could probably just stop there. That moral is fairly universal. You think, well, why can't government do anything right? Is government inherently stupid? No, but it's a debatable question. Here's the thing. There are a couple of arguments for why we should keep government to a minimum. Why government should do very little things. One, because they don't do much of anything very well. In fact, you might say that they have trouble even protecting the White House, all right? You'd think that'd be pretty simple. But the thing is that government doesn't do many things well. And so I tell people there are two arguments for keeping government small, for minimizing your government. I call them the liberty argument and the sort of efficiency argument. The liberty argument is what Thomas Paine said. Thomas Paine said that government's a necessary evil. And you think, oh, that's a terrible thing to say about government. And I think, well, it kind of is, because I'm part of the government now. But government is a necessary evil. Why is it a necessary evil? Because you have to give up part of your freedom to have government. You got to give up some of your taxes. Now, this isn't an argument, or some of your labor, some of your hard-earned money. You have to give up to form a government. This isn't an argument for having no government. It's just an argument for minimizing how much freedom you have to give up to have a government. The other argument is the efficiency argument. Milton Friedman kind of popularized this by one simple, true statement. He said, nobody spends somebody else's money as wisely as they spend their own. Think about it. Do you think people in government care whether it's $10 or 10,000, 10 million, or 10 billion? Or anymore, we don't even talk about billions, we're talking about trillions. Do you think any of them lay awake at night thinking about, wonder if I made a mistake with that $10 billion I voted on today? But each and every one of us, if we had $1,000, or if I asked you to give me $1,000 for an investment, I'm going to open a new business in town. Do you think you'd think about it before you gave it to me? Do you think you might worry whether you're getting it back? If you borrow money for a business or borrow money for your house, do you think about that money? Yeah, because it's your money. So things are always more efficient in the real world. And you have to meet a payroll, you have to make a profit, all of those signals. Every day there's a signal back to you to be efficient. Government gets none of those signals. So government's wildly inefficient, so we should let them do very little. When we look at how we're going to get to prosperity in this country again, how are we going to get jobs again, it's a real simple message. Keep more money in your community. Keep more money in North Carolina. Keep more money in Greenville and send less money to Washington. And you say, well, aren't all Republicans for that? The sad truth is no. What passes for bold in Washington is, hey guys, I'm for revenue neutral tax reform. And I say, if that's what we're for, I'll just go home. I'll go home, I'll still yell at my TV when I'm angry, but I'm not participating. I'm not giving up a lot of the things I could do at home with my family to go to Washington to be for revenue neutral tax reform.
Amen. Amen.
Does anybody remember Ronald Reagan getting up and saying, "Good morning, America, I'm for revenue neutral tax reform"? He was for reducing taxes. And we had 20 million jobs created because we were boldly for what we're for. So we have a big debate going on all across the country. How's the party going to get big enough to win again? And I've been fairly harsh. I've said we evolve, adapt, or die. We have to become a bigger party, but we don't become a bigger party by diluting our message. What we are for, we should be more boldly for. We are the party of the Constitution. We're the party, frankly, of the Bill of Rights. We're the party that will protect your rights if you are a minority. You can be a minority because of the color of your skin or the shade of your ideology. You can be a minority because you're a fundamentalist Christian, or you like to teach your kids at home, or you're Jewish, or you're black, or you're Asian American. There's a lot of reasons why you're a minority. But we need to stand up for every minority. The Bill of Rights isn't for the prom queen. The Bill of Rights isn't for the high school quarterback. They're going to be treated fairly. They always do fine. The Bill of Rights is truly for those who might be unorthodox, who might have an unusual idea, who might not look like everybody else. So we have big debates in Washington, and I think one of the biggest debates we had over the last 4 or 5 years is whether or not you could detain an American citizen without a trial. I can't imagine anybody who could be for that. But many members of our party were. We had this enormous debate, and one of the other senators said to me on the floor, I said to him, you could take an American citizen and send them to Guantanamo Bay with no trial? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. And I said, sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? Anybody remember Richard Jewell, the Olympic bomber, the so-called Olympic bomber? Well, it turns out everybody thought he was guilty. He was convicted on TV, and within hours, but turned out he wasn't him. He wasn't guilty. But can you imagine if he'd have been a black man in the South in 1920, what would have happened to him? The Bill of Rights is to protect minorities, whether it's color of your skin or the shade of your ideology. We need to be the party that stands up for the rights of everyone. We need to proclaim our message with the passion of Patrick Henry, but also proclaim our message with an optimism. Proclaim our message like the painter Robert Henry said. He said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. I think when we proclaim our message like a man coming over the hill singing, when we proclaim our message with the passion of Patrick Henry, then we're going to be the dominant party again. I want to be part of that. I thank you for helping my friend.
Senator, thank you very much. And the senator said he would rather be out in the crowd shaking hands than taking questions. You can ask him questions then. So please, again, let's say thank you.
You're from Kentucky, right?
Right.
Well, that's where I'm really
Where to you. I do not know what Senator Rand Paul is going to do in the future. But I know that politics as usual is not going to fix America's problems. Electing a president that is picked by the party bosses is not going to fix America's problems. I want to read just one slight sentence from the presidential oath. And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Mr. Bush did not keep his word when he swore to the American people. Mr. Obama has not kept his word when he swore to the American people. But the man I'm going to introduce now, if given that chance, will keep his word to the American people, and that is the senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am glad to be in North Carolina to endorse my friend, Walter Jones, for re-election. You guys going to get him back? You going to win again? Good. Now, I say come back to North Carolina because I spent 7 years in North Carolina. In fact, I probably almost moved close to your district. We interviewed in Wilson, almost, a little bit outside the district. And I always tell people that's my favorite trivia question. Do you know how you say Wilson if you're from North Carolina? You got to add a T in there. Wilson. I'm from I'm from Wilson. Or if you're from way out in eastern North Carolina or even eastern Virginia, how do you say when you have somebody, you want to have somebody come over to your H-O-U-S-E, what do you say? Would you like to come over to my house? Or have you been to my home before? And so whatever happened with the H, that people lost the H. But no, I like coming back. I spent 7 years at Duke, and I got to Kentucky, and I was like, you know, I'm going to put my diploma on the wall. I went to Duke Medical School. They'll think that was a good school, and that'll help me get patients. I got there in 1993, right after Leitner made that shot against the University of Kentucky. The shot that's probably been replayed more than any other shot in the history. So I was in Durham at the time when Leitner makes that shot, you know, 1.4 seconds to go. And if you really know your basketball, he gets the pass and dribbles once. Who has the wherewithal to dribble once when you have 1.4 seconds to go? He dribbles once and makes it. Another bit of trivia, do you know that Leitner had a perfect game? 10 for 10 from the field, 10 for 10 from the line. So anyway, about the time that Kentucky goes ahead with 1.4 seconds to go, makes a shot, lucky shot actually, off the glass. And goes in, Kentucky's ahead by 1, and our phone starts ringing. And we're in Durham. We have a bunch of friends over from medical school and residency. And this was in the day when you actually had a phone that had like it's a cord. I don't know if you've ever seen these. It was attached to a cord. And this was the old days. People actually answered their phone. You didn't screen. You didn't know who was calling. You just answered it because, in fact, if you still ever see your parents or your grandparents, like, they still have to answer the phone. Why? Nobody answers the phone anymore. So anyway, my wife hopped up to answer the phone with Kentucky had made the shot, and she gets there and she gets the phone. About that time, Leitner makes a shot, and whoever's on the other end hangs up. And her brothers are big UK fans, so we suspected this, but it took about 10 years for one of them to finally admit they were calling to give us a hard time about Duke losing until Duke was actually winning. I was in the barbecue line. I finally got some good barbecue. Got up to North Carolina. I was in the barbecue line. There's a guy in front of me tonight. We won't name any names. But he had 2 big heaping plates of barbecue. And I said, you're not going to live very long eating like that. And he said, well, my granddad lived to be 105. I said to him, well, I bet your granddad didn't live to be 105 eating like that. And he said, no, my granddad lived to be 105 by minding his own business. I think there's a moral there. Maybe we could use that as sort of a public cry for government, minding your own business. I think a corollary to that might be, leave me the heck alone. You know, do you want to be part of the Leave Me Alone coalition? If we want our party to be bigger, maybe if we ask people to join the Leave Me the Heck Alone party, we'd have a bigger coalition. I'm of that mind. I've been going to college campuses. I've been going to conservative college campuses. I even went to Berkeley. I've been to every extreme in between. I've been to Liberty University. I've been to Berkeley. There's a big difference there. But you know, I gave them the same message, and it's received in both places well. The message is, what you do or say on your cell phones, none of the government's business. And people say, well, what, you don't want to get terrorists? No, I do want to get terrorists, but I don't want to get 300 million Americans to find the terrorist, all right? I think sometimes we make the haystack so big we can't find the needle. You know, for example, you know the 2 boys in Boston? We were warned by the Russians that one of them was potentially a terrorist. He traveled back to Chechnya, and nobody knew he even traveled. Do you know why they didn't know he traveled? The computer program couldn't figure out alternative spellings for his name. We've been 10 years after 9/11 and we haven't figured that out. That's happened multiple times. One of these kids could probably write the code in about 10 minutes to figure out how to have multiple different spellings for a name. And yet we did nothing. The TSA looks at everyone. Everybody's got to strip from head to toe and be patted down. Why don't we look and scrutinize those who are traveling here from countries that might attack us in a significant way? But why don't we try to have a way where people travel frequently in our country can do it in a respectable manner where we don't have to be harassed at every moment. There's a professor at Harvard by the name of Noah Feldman, and he said, the next time you go to the airport, you got to hold your hands over your head for 7 vulnerable seconds. Ask yourself, is this the pose of a free man? So we do have to be considerate about preserving our liberties. Sure, we have to defend our country from terrorists, but we have to be careful that we don't give up what we're defending against in the process. I know a lot of you have been worried that your government might shut down. So I have good news for you. Your government's open, okay? The bad news is your government's open, okay? Your government's open in borrowing $1 million a minute. So in the next 13 hours of my speech, we're going to borrow how much? Can you imagine? In the next 20 minutes, we'll borrow $20 million. I mean, it is completely crazy what's going on with this. So we had this big battle about a year ago. You remember when the government shut down? Well, sort of. But the president was afraid you might not notice. Why? Because 2/3 of your government's on autopilot. 2/3 of your government is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It never closes down. It is immortal. It is in perpetuity and not paid for. But 2/3 of your government never shut down. So really, we were talking about 1/3 of your government. And why were we even talking about that? Because Congress doesn't do their job. There's 12 appropriation bills. Historically, we'd pass them one at a time. And once they were passed, that part of the government was open. We don't pass any appropriation bills anymore. At the very end of the year, as the deadline looms, we look like a bunch of chickens running around with our heads cut off, and we say, we've got to pass it or the government shuts down. It's 2,000 pages. Nobody reads it. Nobody can physically read it. We often get it at 8 in the morning and we pass it by noon. And then it's hurry up, get the House, do it. They need to go, pass it over to the Senate. Nobody reads it. And then to make matters worse, the last time when we kept government open about 2 weeks ago, they stuck a little war in the spending bill. We didn't even have a debate over going to war. We just stuck it in. I told them, inconvenient time to talk about it. Well, war's never convenient, but you ought to debate about it. We shouldn't willy-nilly send our young men, our honorable and courageous young men and women, without having a debate over war. And it's really a crime that we didn't. But when government shut down a year ago, we had about 1/3, 2/3 is open in perpetuity. We had 1/3. 1/3 of your government is split. Half of it's defense and half of it's sort of the other stuff, welfare, other things. So anyway, we said, well, we should pay our military, and I agree. So we did. We opened up the military. So now really, when the president was squawking about how evil and awful Republicans were, 1/6 of the government was closed. So what did he do? He was afraid you might not notice. So you remember what he did? He wrapped the World War II monument to make sure you knew and that you were punished for being for smaller government. The World War II monument doesn't cost any money. It was paid for with private donations. Someone's got to mow the grass. I would have volunteered to mow the grass. I like to mow my grass, all right? I would have volunteered. They wrapped it with barricades. But if you want to remember one image of the shutdown, you remember this. You remember the image of World War II veterans cutting the barricades and throwing them on the lawn at the White House. But we did learn some things, and Congressman Jones will confirm this. During the shutdown, they sent us a request. They said, list your essential and your unessential employees. And I'm like, wow, we're going to learn a lesson here. We're going to try to figure out what part of government we absolutely have to have and what we don't. And so we got this, and I thought it was interesting. I get to fill out a list for my employees. And I said, well, let's find out what the IRS's list looks like. So I asked my staff, they called it the IRS, 90% unessential. I said, we're going to learn something here. There's a real lesson we're going to learn about government. 90% of the IRS is unessential. I said, call the EPA. So they called the EPA 95% unessential. And I thought, we're on to something here. We're going to discover that most of government is unessential. And I was so naive, because the more I dug into this, I discovered something. Guess what? If you're unessential, you don't have to come to work, but you do get paid. So there's an incentive to be unessential. It has nothing to do with essential. Instead, it has something to do with not working and still getting paid. Every federal employee was paid. In fact, you think, well, gosh, certainly we got rid of some bad ones. You can't. Are you crazy? You can't fire a federal employee. That's insane. But they were looking at the EPA, and they actually did something for the first time. They actually started looking at some individual employees. So they found one employee had not been to work in 20 years. Now, she had a disability, but she had not communicated with anyone in the office for 5 years. You think they fired her? You can't fire a federal employee. Are you crazy? They found another woman that had had 17 members of her family have paid internships. She was also selling vitamins and cosmetics and all kinds of other stuff on her work computer. Did we fire her? Are you crazy? We can't fire a federal employee. They found another guy who'd been downloading porn 6 hours a day. Certainly we fired him, right? He still works for the EPA. Think lowest learner. You can't get rid of even a crook, all right? They all continue to work for the government. But my favorite, though, is a guy named Jonathan Beale. Jonathan Beale had worked for the CIA for 11 years. He was said to be Gina McCarthy's right-hand man. He was really important. You know what his expertise was? Global warming. He's a big deal up there. So anyway, but they found out and they looked at, he was gone most time. He hadn't been to work in 6 months, but he kept getting glowing performance reviews. They gave him raise after raise. They said, oh, Jonathan Beale, he's great. And so they did something extraordinary. They actually asked, well, why doesn't he come to work? And his boss said, well, he works also for the CIA. I'm like, really? The EPA and the CIA both? What a combination. And so then they did something really extraordinary. They called the CIA and they asked him, what about Jonathan Beale? And they said, Jonathan who? They had never heard of him. And so I imagine Jonathan Beale makes $150,000 a year. You know how many people make over $100,000 a year? 100,000 federal workers make over $100,000 a year. And I think they were all unessential, being paid and not working. So anyway, Jonathan Beale makes $150,000 a year, and I just imagine him by the pool, because he's got to have a pool, right? So he's by the pool, his boss calls, and he's got a beer, and he's sitting by the pool, and they're like, Jonathan, are you coming in today? And he's like, no, I'm in Istanbul on secret assignment. You remember the VA scandal? What was the biggest part of the VA scandal? Is that even when we caught them making up waiting lists where people could have died on the waiting list, no one was fired. Anybody remember 9/11? Anybody remember anybody being fired over 9/11? We have spent trillions upon trillions of dollars trying to be safer. I am for being safer. I am for spending some money to try to make the nation safer. But we have done ridiculous things. We spent $8 million in Fargo last year. And I tell people, if the terrorists get to Fargo, we might as well surrender. We give equipment to our local police forces, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles that weigh 20 tons. We had an investigation of this the other day because of all the force that was used in Ferguson, and we said, where's this equipment coming from? And they said, well, it's surplus from the military. The military needs to send us someplace. They found out a third of it's new. So my question, if it's brand new and it's surplus, does that mean that we're buying stuff to replace the stuff we're giving away to police forces that have no business with 20-ton vehicles? Dundee, Michigan, a town of 3,900, has a mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle. A 20-ton vehicle in a town of 3,000. It encourages probably the wrong response to someone out there yelling and screaming and protesting or whatever. This is America, for goodness sakes. You're supposed to be able to protest. But the thing is that we've gone a little bit crazy on all of this. When we started with Homeland Security, they actually gave wish lists to every state. Indiana had 7,000 earmark requests for Homeland Security. The Mule Day Festival, the popcorn factory, you know, all those high-risk terrorist targets. It's like everything else that's good in Washington that we should do something. Protect our country. They take the money and they use it for something frivolous. So I have this debate with the president. I sent him a letter and I said, well, why don't we cut some spending? And he says, well, we really couldn't. Where would we cut? We've cut to the bone. Where would we cut spending? So I gave him a list of a few things. I said, well, why don't we just not rehire anybody when they retire? You save $6 trillion a year by not rehiring people. If you simply freeze federal spending, no cuts, just freeze it, the budget balances within 10 years. If you were to cut 1 penny out of every dollar, the budget actually balances within 5 years. People say, how could we do that? Has anybody here ever had to deal with 1% less in income? People do it all the time. Government does the opposite. When you suffer, they say government should spend more. Well, maybe we should balance our budget to cause less suffering. Maybe we'd have more jobs. This administration has been riddled with scandals. I think of old McDonald's farm. Here a scandal, there a scandal, everywhere a scandal. We got a brand new one. They can't even keep intruders out of the White House. But for the first time, they actually let somebody go. But watch closely. That person will probably turn up in another federal job somewhere. But of all the ones, all the different scandals, you know, from the IRS, which does bother me to think that you lose an election and you're going to be audited because you're in the losing party. But of all the scandals, probably the one that bothers me most is Benghazi. Because the thing is, it is the job of the federal government to defend our country, to defend our embassies, to defend our troops, wherever they are. And so in the 6 months leading up to Benghazi, there was request after request after request for more security. 6 months in advance of it, they sent a cable back saying we'd like a plane to be able to move about the country and maybe leave in a hurry if we had to. State Department denied. 3 days later, though, Hillary Clinton's State Department approved an electrical charging station for the embassy in Vienna because it seems we were trying to green it up a bit. You know, one of the primary functions of the State Department is not diplomacy, but it's greening up the planet. So we ordered a $100,000 charging station for the Chevy Volt that is subsidized to the tune of $200,000 per car so we can show how green we are in Vienna. But meanwhile, we didn't have any money for a plane to fly our embassy staff around in Libya. During the summer preceding the attack in Benghazi, we spent, or Hillary Clinton's State Department spent, $650,000 on Facebook ads. Seems they were looking for more friends for the State Department Facebook. $650,000. They spent $700,000 on landscaping for the embassy in Brussels. They spent $5 million on crystal barware and glassware for the embassies. The list goes on and on. In August, though, Colonel Wood, member of the 16-person security team, sends cables, urgent cables, saying, we need to remain in country. The British were already leaving at that point. There had been an explosion at the British embassy. There were rumors daily of the possibility of assassination and attack, and they were refused permission to stay in country. In the middle of August, 2 or 3 weeks before the attack, there's a cable specifically sent from Ambassador Stevens to Hillary Clinton. And when she came before my committee, that's the question I asked her. I said, Secretary Clinton, when you were asked directly, when you were sent cables directly from the war zone, from a nation just emerging from civil war, from a nation in the throes of danger, from an ambassador, did you read his cables? And she acted as if it was sort of beneath her. It was somebody else's fault. She wasn't expected to read the cables. And I said, frankly, you're not reading the cables. You're not providing the security of Benghazi should preclude you from ever being considered as Commander-in-Chief. One of the things Walter has talked about, and I've talked about the Middle East, is it's not only the defense of Benghazi that was bad, the whole war was ill-conceived. We were never asked permission, the way the Constitution says we should be asked. Our founding fathers were explicit about this. Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers, he said, that history demonstrates what the Constitution supposes, that the executive is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, we took that power and we vested it in Congress. Congress is supposed to vote, and it was very intentional. It was to have a real debate before we went to war. But we went to war in Libya without authorization, and you know what's going on in Libya now? Chaos. I tell people it's a jihadist wonderland. They're everywhere.
They literally swim in our embassy pool in Tripoli. Our embassy, what was left of it after the assassination of our ambassador, just left about a month ago. They couldn't leave by plane. It was too dangerous to go to the airport. They had to flee overland, and they barely got out of the country. Libya has no government, radical jihad, radical Islam, people who hate America, and people who would come and attack us roam the countryside in Libya. Why? Because if there's one universal truth to the Middle East, it's that the secular dictators hate radical Islam, and they did create stability. And every time that a secular dictator has been toppled, chaos ensues, radical Islam rises to the forefront, and we are more dangerous. It's not just Libya. It happened under Republicans' watch. Saddam Hussein was a secular dictator, but he wasn't coming to America to attack us. But now Iraq's full of people who would come to America to attack us. ISIS wasn't a threat 2 years ago. Why? Because they would have probably been wiped out by Assad. But we put 600 tons of weapons into the Syrian civil war. And what has happened? We created a haven, not just us, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. They've poured weapons indiscriminately in there, and most of them have wound up in the hands of ISIS, some unintentionally. But these weapons were given to so-called moderate rebels. And I said this on the floor the other day. How many of these moderate Syrian rebels, these moderate Islamic rebels, do you think would recognize Israel as a nation? Zero. Many of them have already announced that they will attack Israel when they're done with Assad. Many of them said, we don't really care that much about ISIS because ISIS hates Assad also. When we're done with Assad, we might deal with ISIS. Half of the Free Syrian Army has defected and is now fighting with al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda. So we come before a committee last week, and Secretary Kerry says, we ask him, where do you get the authority? He says, from the 2001 resolution. I said, well, didn't that allow us to go into Afghanistan? What does that have to do with 14 years later or 13 years later? And he said, oh, well, it says we can attack, we can provide defense against forces associated with al-Qaeda. And I said, well, it doesn't really say that, but if that's the way you interpret it, maybe since the moderate rebels are fighting alongside al-Qaeda, you could use a resolution to actually attack the moderate rebels you're giving weapons to. It makes no sense. But he's gone on with this charade that he can do whatever he wants. And then finally said, well, even if the resolution in 2001 to go into Afghanistan has nothing to do with Syria, well, the president has Article 2 authority. Article 2 is where the executive branch gets their power under the Constitution. It's like, so really he doesn't care. None of them care. And this upset Congressman Jones as well as I. We didn't have any vote. They just went on willy-nilly to do it. The thing is there can be honest debate over whether we should, and frankly, I think we do have to do something about ISIS now. But there should be no debate about the fact that it should be done in a constitutional way. We should have debate in Congress, and it should never be done unilaterally by the president. I've been pretty harsh about the Republican Party winning the presidency again and winning national elections. We're doing great in certain congressional districts and certain red states. We're doing fine. But I've said we must either adapt, evolve, or die as a party. We need to be a more diverse party. We got to have more people in our party. They're black, white, brown. I say with tattoos, without tattoos, with earrings, without earrings, with ponytails. We need to look like the rest of America. There are ways we can reach out. We don't have to dilute what we stand for, but I've been trying to go places we haven't gone. I went to the Urban League a month ago. I'm the first elected Republican to go in years. I was the only elected Republican there. But what I do is I bring a message that says, you know what? We care about people who live in poverty, and we care about people who are unemployed. And how would we fix it? We have a plan. So I took a plan to Detroit, and I said, we will help Detroit by leaving $1.3 billion in Detroit. I'm not going to get it from North Carolina. I would just let them keep it. Money that they would have normally sent to Washington over a 10-year period, it would be a $1 billion bailout, but a bailout with their own money. Democrats have nothing to offer Detroit, but we got 3% of the vote in Detroit. So I think we show up, we have a plan, we tell people who have difficult circumstances that we want to help them, and you know what? Then all of a sudden we transform a whole electorate that hasn't been considering Republicans, and then we become the dominant party again. How do we do this across America? We got to show up. And I think as we do it, we have to do it with an optimism. We have to do it with a smile. We have to do it by showing that we truly do care about people where they are and where they live. I'm reminded of the poet or the painter Robert Henry, and he talked about to young painters, his advice was, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. And I love that image. I think when we proclaim our message like a man coming over the hill singing, when we proclaim our message with a passion of Patrick Henry, I think when we proclaim our message with such optimism and enthusiasm and warmth for growing the economy and for getting a job for everyone, then I think we'll be the dominant party again. Thank you very much.